Action Research Multimedia presentation by Ruthie Zukov. How do I help ESL learners achieve success in my reading and writing lessons? Statement of core values or worldview. Equality is important to me because I grew up with a mother who had a handicap and who was also an ESL learner. I know firsthand how that inequality can impact the well-being and growth of a person. It is important to me to create a classroom environment that is positive and supportive for my ESL students so they will not be made to feel less than their peers. I would do this through peer building and community building within the classroom through collaborative activities. Creating an environment where the students feel they can trust those around them and feel safe in, this is really important to me. Trust is another value that is important for ESL students to have to allow them to take risks and to be creative in their problem solving without feeling judged in any way. This environment will help with creating an inclusive atmosphere and support inquiry-based learning lessons. Respect is rooted in the very core of my being. I am a true believer in treating others as you would want them to treat you. It is an exchange of energy between people. I would want my students to show one another there is a sense of caring between them within the classroom and to respect their peers who may have challenges. Literacy skills, that is reading and writing, are critical skills that all students need to develop regardless of their ability. For those students for whom English is not their first language, this can be a real challenge. In working with these students in my placements, there were constant struggles in their confidence. For example, not being sure of what they were saying or writing caused them to speak quietly with intimidation. It can also be challenging to teachers who are constantly trying to meet each student's needs, as well as finding strategies to help each learner be successful in their learning. There are a number of strategies that can help ESL learners achieve success in their reading and writing that, as teachers, it is important we learn. It is important to improve the quality of teaching for ESL learners because they are Canada's future. As teachers need to give them every opportunity to succeed, here are 5 great learning strategies. The first is to increase ESL students' English language production and peer interaction. It is important as a teacher to have specific and measurable goals set such as, I will assign my ELL students to verbally demonstrate their English speaking abilities in classroom work at least 3 times a week. It is important that there are 2 key items ELLs need to in order to improve their English. They are time and practice. Activities can be structured to support student-to-student or group interaction to help with learning concepts. The second strategy is to explicitly teach English language vocabulary and structures. Again, specifying a measurable resolution such as I will identify, teach, and post key academic vocabulary and structures for 1 content lesson each day. As a teacher, I would begin by reviewing a content within a lesson and identifying not just the vocabulary that every student needs to know, but other vocabulary words and grammar structures that ESL students may not be familiar with. The third strategy would be to build an ESL's background knowledge to increase comprehension. Always focusing on a goal as a teacher, I would look at specific and measurable goals like I will elicit background knowledge from my ELL students in 1 content area through a variety of activities, including questioning and graphic organizer. Learning something new is like stacking building blocks. The more you have, the higher you can go. It is not always apparent what building blocks ELLs come with due to language barriers, and sometimes ELL students don't connect their previous experience with the lesson currently being taught. That is where the teacher's skill at drawing on background knowledge becomes so important. The fourth strategy is to increase ESL parent involvement. Setting a teacher goal of I will contact the parent each week to share information on my student and inform the parent of any school events. As a teacher, I recognize that parental support is a big key to academic success. ESL families are often at a disadvantage when it comes to supporting their child because of language and cultural barriers. It is important to have ongoing communication by phone or face-to-face with the parents to ensure the student's success. The fifth strategy is to increase writing opportunities for the ESL students. Having the writing goal of students will engage in a weekly writing activity that will focus on developing a certain skill such as creative vocabulary use or the correct format of a paragraph or essay and looking at peer editing. The ability to write effectively and accurately to convey a message is a very important skill for all students to have. Students need to engage in a variety of writing exercises to develop an understanding of different types of writing and to identify their strengths and weaknesses as a writer. In working with the ESL students in my grade 3 classroom placement, I worked on a writing assignment closely with them where they had to write their own fairy tale that was called a twisted fairy tale. They came up with their own characters, setting, a problem that needed to be solved, and a solution to that problem. It was important they use their own background knowledge to connect to what they were writing. They used a story map to write a rough draft. It was important for them to skip lines and to help with the editing and to use a dictionary for finding the correct spelling to the words. The graphic organizer helped them to organize their thoughts and ideas so they did not need to focus on the correct spelling and grammar initially. Definitions and terms. Literacy, according to Wikipedia, is traditionally understood as the ability to read, write, and use arithmetic. The modern term's meaning has been expanded to include the ability to use language, numbers, images, computers, and other basic means to understand, communicate, gain useful knowledge, and to use the dominant symbol systems of a culture. The concept of literacy is expanding in OECD countries to include skills to access knowledge through technology and ability to assess complex contexts. A person who travels and resides in a foreign country but is unable to read or write in the language of the host country would also be regarded by the locals as being illiterate. The key to literacy is reading development, a progression of skills that begins with the ability to understand spoken words and decode written words, and culminates in the deep understanding of text. Reading development involves a range of complex language underpinnings, including awareness of speech sounds, phonology, spelling patterns, orthography, word meaning, semantics, grammar syntax, and patterns of word formation, morphology, all of which provide a necessary platform for reading, fluency, and comprehension. Definition of terms. In the article Theories of ESL Literacy Instruction, there are different approaches and theories on how literacy is learned. Here are 11 theoretical applications that are used for ESL students. The participatory approach involves learner and instructor having face-to-face discussion beginning to read, decoding, and write encoding. The whole approach looks at how language should be reviewed as a whole before broken down into smaller pieces. It focuses on the collaborative approach to learning, and students are encouraged to take risks both orally and written. The language approach focuses on the learner's background knowledge and not focusing on the grammar, but rather the content and understanding. The competency or performance-based approach is based on whether or not the learner can perform the task. And the functional approach looks at communicative and behavioral skills combined with linguistic objectives. The communication approach is similar to the functional approach, where communication is the core. The ethnographic approach looks at social, cultural aspects of language and how the student communicates in their own lives. For English language learners, the integration of new learning with prior knowledge involves connecting what students know in their first language to English. The task-based approach deals with task-oriented instruction that involves group and collaboration to encourage communication. The project-based approach is similar to task, but it involves solving a problem as a group resulting in a product. The natural approach is a meaning-based approach where students begin with one word and then move on to 2 or 3 words in a safe, supportive classroom environment. The physical approach matches a physical response to a command, like saying sit down and having them do that movement. My experience in the classroom was looking at the importance of integrating as many of these theoretical approaches as possible for successful learning. Digital technology is a great way for ESL students to learn English. The app called Raz Kids is used among ESL teachers to help in their students' learning and development. It is easy to use and they can use it at home. The program is set up for different levels of learners, so it is easy to have it fit where the child is at in their learning and comprehension to questions. BYOD, students bring their own device to school. There are thousands of educational applications which offer interactive ways to learn through gaming and social networking. And looking at the teaching strategies that benefit ESL students' assessment is very important. Differentiated instruction is powerful and beneficial for ESL students. Benchmark is a great way to assess students' work as it is broken down into steps. Guided reading allows the teacher to work one-on-one with the student or in small groups to work on vocabulary and comprehension. Small group work or buddy reading also helps ELL students work on oral and language skills as well as reading, writing, and comprehension skills. It is very important for an ESL student to take on a growth mindset attitude in their learning development. ESL students need lots of support and encouragement. These students tend to feel as though they are at a disadvantage, and because of this, they can develop a negative outlook in learning if they are not taught to approach learning with a growth mindset. It is important as a teacher to encourage a positive attitude in ESL students. They need to believe they will succeed and that they will always be learning and there is always room for improvement. An example for a growth mindset would be, even if the student is not doing well in writing, instead of saying to themselves, I will never be good at writing, they can take on a new attitude of, I will train my brain to learn writing and I have a plan to do so. ESL students need to be encouraged to never give up and to keep challenging themselves. It is important from a pedagogical standpoint to set educational goals for the students and to find ways to improve their learning through surface reflection, finding strategies and methods to reach each of these goals. Always keeping in mind critical reflection and how, as a teacher, it is important to look at both the ethical and social consequences in teaching. It is important to give each child a fair chance to learn. Looking at values and beliefs of the ESL students and self-reflecting on this is valuable in understanding and validating who the child is as a person. Self-reflection is central to a growth mindset, making sure the child's confidence and belief in themselves is strong. Here is a mind map illustrating the best practices to consider with ESL learners. Literature summary. Reading is considered one of the most important academic skills. It is important not only in language but also in other subject areas like social studies and science. Student success is dependent on this. In the article supporting English language learners in content reading, it looks at how students find comprehension challenging, and focusing on strategies such as background knowledge can help to facilitate reading comprehension. In working with the ESL students in my teaching, I found making connections with things that were familiar to them was an important part of finding their success in reading the material. In the article Compare, Contrast, Comprehend, it talks about how ELL students face difficulty in reading vocabulary and reading comprehension compared to their English-speaking peers. By using the compare and contrast text method, it will help with building both academic and specific content vocabulary. Having the students look at recognizing the similarities and differences between two or more things is a very helpful strategy. I used this strategy during my poetry lessons and found it very helpful with the ESL students in their comprehension of new words. In the article Growth and Predictors of Change in English Language Learners Reading Comprehension, it focuses on all the components of language and their effects on comprehension, such as vocabulary, syntax, and listening comprehension. The article on using peer tutors to improve reading comprehension discusses using quick comprehension strategies like questioning what is being read or not, reading passively, understanding new words, imaging using prior knowledge, connecting, and explaining in their own words. Peer-to-peer instruction in writing and grammar does not always work well for ELL students. In the article Teaching Matters, it talks about the importance of peer editing writing exercises with most students. However, it can be an awkward situation for ELL students feeling self-conscious with their errors. It is suggested to have the students who are paired together to read out loud together so there isn't pressure of performing alone. In the article Picturing Words, it looks at encouraging students to write about topics that are important to them, having them look at photographs to come up with story writing ideas. In the article A Study of ELL Students' Writing Difficulties, it focused on the perspective of an ELL student, the challenges they face in learning a new language. The last article on writing was through inquiry-based learning called Empowering ELL Students to Improve Their Writing Skills Through Inquiry-Based Learning. Using different levels of inquiry-based learning can be used in assisting ELL with their writing skills to achieve success. Using critical thinking, highlighting vocabulary to summarize content, and looking at evidence in the text, finding meaning in context, and mastering the meaning of new words are all methods to help towards learning to improve writing skills. How do I help ESL learners achieve success in my reading and writing lessons? Through data sources. Data sources, how, why, or what. Looking at the data source of anecdotal notes, checklists, and interviews are all ways to help with data sourcing. In looking at triangulation of data with anecdotal records, we look at specific and general skills, style of learning, look at problem solving, and higher level thinking, observing strengths and needs. Creating a chart of these areas for each ESL student will ensure the validity of the data. In an interview, looking at specific attitudes towards their learning and towards a growth mindset, asking students the same questions will ensure reliability. It is important to look at the strengths and weaknesses of sources of data in anecdotal records. It is important to look at the strengths and weaknesses of sources of data in interviews. How do I help ESL learners achieve success in my reading and writing lessons through data collection procedures? In looking at the timeline chart, it is important to consider the type of data, anecdotal notes, interview assessments, and how often it will be collected and when. Ethical considerations. Anecdotal records need to be taken privately without the other students becoming aware of the ESL students who are being observed. This can be done through going to a separate workplace to write and record what is being observed. Creating a quiet time at a table in the back of the room to interview the students can help with keeping what is being said as confidential and private. In conclusion, designing this action research has supported my knowledge in teaching ESL students to become successful in their reading and writing by focusing on each student individually and as a whole. Using anecdotal records to look at their specific and general skills, their style of learning, and observing strengths and weaknesses all contribute to my own learning and reflection as a teacher. Using the interview technique to ask them questions on finding out their attitudes and feelings towards their learning and encouraging a growth mindset is also critical in their development and mine. It is important as teachers to keep an editing checklist, check often for comprehension, look at student assessment and conferencing. Collaborating with their peers can be very encouraging, seating arrangements and support with modeling and pair and share. Independent work at home, journaling, and word walls with first language transitions are also helpful and contribute to their success. Charts and use of visual supports, as well as use of real objects, are all great strategies to use. Language is learned through imitation and habit formation, innate cognitive process, and social interaction. Strategies and programs like benchmark, guided reading programs, small group work, as well as working with a buddy, help the ELL student with acquiring and improving reading and writing skills. An idea I tried out in my class was on poetry and looking at modern day poetry, which is found in pop songs. I had the students pick a song that they loved and work through learning new vocabulary from it. They found the exercise both interesting and fun. A teaching strategy I also tried was think, pair, and share. Having these students collaborate with other students, it worked really well in that it was fun and engaging for the students. Something I would like to change is having these students develop greater confidence and self-awareness in themselves. I use daily positive affirmations with the students to help them believe in themselves and what they already know to build from that. It is very important for children to be made to feel welcome and validated. ESL children can feel vulnerable, isolated, and segregated. It is critical that both the school as a whole and the classroom celebrate culture and the understanding of its meaning. Having a cultural dress day in schools to encourage part of their identity and multicultural food days to celebrate their traditions are very important in regards to the cultural inclusiveness for students. Initiating these types of events give the students value and acceptance of who they are. And by giving them confidence, it transfers over into contributing to their success and with reading and writing. We are living in a multicultural society, and this is reflected within our schools. Diversity awareness and identity development need to be taken into account when preparing for a growing multicultural population. It is critical to look at the student as a whole and to be aware of many factors that may affect their learning. Look at who they are as a person, their values, beliefs, cultural identity, and where they fit in socially, ethically, and even politically. References. 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 References.